Okay, my name is Don Herr. I currently live in Napomo, California. I entered the Marine Corps in 1974. I'd been out of high school for 2 years at the time, was married, and the oil embargo hit. My wife was pregnant. The construction job I had dried up and went away. This was in Florida, in Orlando. And because there was no fuel, the trucks weren't running, so, and it was like, I don't know if I really want to do this the rest of my life as far as construction work. So, and I had blown an opportunity to have a full ride college scholarship earlier, just because I was a smart ass and thought I knew better than anybody else. So this was 2 years later, 2 years more experience, and went down and saw the recruiter. Did fairly well in the ASVABs, got an aviation guarantee, and then about a week and a half I was on the Yellow Footprints at Parris Island. Spent about 3.5 months there, graduated in October of '74. Went to Memphis to go to school. Immediately got put on support duty for about 3 months because they were backlogged in school. And in the meantime, my wife delivered. We had a son. And 2 weeks after that, I started school, A Fund P and then BEE. Came out of that and ended up getting, I guess lucky enough, because I was supposed to go to AVA. Ended up going to the Cal School in Denver, Colorado at Lowry Air Force Base. So we packed up everything with the newborn and moved to Denver. And spent about 9 months there in school. And once I finished school there, was assigned to at that time Hams 29 at New River. And so cross country we went again with the U-Haul and the car behind it, and got there. And I was every bit of a meritorious corporal by the time I got there. And it was a struggle because we were kind of short on funds, but got there, did well. About a year and a half after that, sergeant by then. Went back to Memphis for the Aviation Advanced School, ended up going to the C School. Got out of that, turned around and went right back to New River again, and stayed there until early '80 when I got transferred to Iwakuni. I went over to Iwakuni and I was in Hams 15 over there, supporting F4s, and spent a year there. When I got orders back to the States, I had been selected for Staff Sergeant, and when I got back I found out I got selected for Warrant Officer. So I went to Warrant Officer's class in '82, came out of there, and then welcome to the frog world. Got assigned to 264, got there, 2 days after I got there we were doing a deployment to Mosby, Georgia, I believe it was, doing mountain training. Found out all about over-torque situations, changing aft trainings in the field, rotor heads, blown seals, the whole 9 yards. And learned the aircraft very quickly. Had a lot of really good staff and COs in that squadron at that time. The squadron was really strong, and learned a lot about the aircraft. And it was good that we did, because 4 months later we were on the boat. I think we were on the Guadalcanal that time, and heading to Beirut. And we got to Beirut, and a week after we got to Beirut, the maintenance control officer's wife was in a bad car accident back in North Carolina, and so he got shipped home, and I became the maintenance control officer for the duration of the composite squadron's time in Beirut. So that was my introduction to the frog world. And I stayed with 264 for that pump, and then another pump after that, and we went through Honduras and Grenada following 261 down there in late '83, and then back to Beirut again in early '84. And when I left, we came back from that float, it was, I believe, I'm trying to think what month it was late in '84 we came back from that float, and got back, and about 4 months later I got a call from the Monitor. He asked me if I wanted to go to Hawaii, because they had recommissioned a 46 Squadron over there, 364, and that's how I got to 364. Transferred over there in July of '85. Joined the squadron as the avionics officer. Deja vu, the maintenance control officer who was there suddenly left. I mean, I don't know to this day, I mean, it was a medical thing, but I mean, he was gone. I had the secondary already, so I ended up being the maintenance control officer. Then when we were in garrison, was all training. Supporting the ground side of Kaneohe, taking the grunts and either ferrying them out to Bellows Air Force Station where they would do simulated, assaults, or we supported the Army too out of Schofield Barracks and stuff up on the hill, Fort Shafter. They had 47s and stuff up there, but they kind of like the frog to do the thing. Another important mission that they do at K-Bay is the fire bucket. You're on fire bucket duty, and so you get aircraft on standby virtually 24 hours a day for 2 weeks at a shot. And they go out, dip it into the bay, fill the bucket up, go out and do firefighting if that was what was called. Do all the typical fast roping and all the typical missions that you do to support the ground side with their training. And then just our typical training flights, a lot of inter-island stuff, which was always good because, I mean, you stay on the island too long, people start getting island fever, and that would be a big part of things. I think a lot of guys on the ground side or station tours or whatever, that they're just there. They're on Oahu the whole time. Where do cross countries. I mean, they do cross countries over the weekend. They would do island hopping. So 2 or 3, if somebody wanted to go along, they had the option to go along, get their own hotel room and stuff. But I mean, it got everybody off the island. The history, in fact, we had, and I want to say his name was Stinson, but I'm not 100% sure. It was one of the former COs from Vietnam, had come to Hawaii for vacation. Stedman, that was his name. And he came over to the squadron. He said, no, I mean, I don't know, but that he didn't know that the squadron had been recommissioned, had been stood back up again, and they were over at the Halikoa over on the in Waikiki, and we're looking around what units were at K-Bay, and lo and behold, there was 364, and he got in touch with our CO at that time, Jerry Merritt, and he came over and with his wife and addressed a AOM, and took a tour around the squadron, and inspected a couple of the aircraft and all that sort of stuff, and spent the day there basically. And but yeah, the perception was that the squadron had been basically a workhorse in Vietnam. They get it done, dependable. If nobody else would do it, 364 would go in and get the job done. One of my COs at New River when I was in 264, Bill Beebe, he, because he had his Silver Star and everything up on his wall in his office, and so I knew he'd been in 364 and talked to him about it, and he told me some stories as far as the things they went and flew, and how they come back looking like Swiss cheese sometimes and all that sort of stuff. But January of '86, left on the UDP to Okinawa. We got over there at Fatima, and some of the guys that had been in 264 with had transferred to Hawaii before I did, and so they were in 364, and knew some of the guys because being in the fall community for at that point about 4 years, had met people from both coasts, and so knew some of the folks in the squadron. And anyway, we did the UDP in Okinawa, and which was a very eye-opening experience because we got there and the aircraft were tired because the UDP, you just transfer aircraft from squadron to squadron to squadron. Everybody flies the living heck out of them, and so we had to fly all the aircraft, and we were composite too with 53 Ds, and we had to fly all the aircraft to Team Spirit about 6 weeks after we were there, which was really a pretty good challenge. We lost an engine on one of the birds about halfway across the channel, and ended up landing on an island and having to ferry another bird back to Fatima to pick up a spare engine because there was no supply chain out where we were at. Brought the engine back up, changed it on the island with a bunch of makeshift jigs and everything else to get it in and out of there. Fortunately, our QA chief, who is a very senior gunnery sergeant named P.T. Ogden, was on that aircraft, and so we had the talent, the experience there to do it. The rest of us were just raggies following his lead, doing what he needed to have done. And I got to Okinawa, had a very successful team spirit. I don't know if you've ever been, if you've ever heard the story about the reindeer at Team Spirit in '86. Well, we had flown the whole exercise, met every sortie, didn't miss anything, frogs or the 53s. Everything was working good, getting packed up and getting ready to go home. The night before we were going to leave, virtually everybody, because we were done flying, so there was nobody on standby or, ready or any of that sort of thing, so everybody went to town. And, it was like a gang of 100 running around from bar to bar to bar. 4 of our crew chiefs got tired of getting kicked out of places, so they went to a little mom and pop shop and bought some spirits for their own self, climbed up on a roof of a building and went from 2 or 3 different roofs, enjoying their spirits and watching everything that was going on the street below, because there was just people everywhere. The Team Spirit was closing down, so all the grunts were in, everybody, and it was a pretty wild scene. Anyway, they got from a concrete roof to a tile roof to essentially a bamboo fiberglass roof, and they went through it and fell into this people's home over there. And one of them broke his leg, or not, he didn't really break his leg, I guess he just basically twisted his ankle. 2 other ones jumped up and ran away, and the fourth one was kind of disoriented. He got captured and got hauled to the local police station. And of course, this is unbeknownst to everybody else. So I was sitting in a bar with a couple of people, and one of the crew chiefs comes in and comes over and goes, he says, Gunner, he says, Cleves got arrested, and Cleves was one of our more senior crew chiefs. And so I went over to the where the MPs had their office at, and yeah, he had been picked up, and he was at the Korean police station, and so it turned out to be a pretty interesting evening. We didn't get back until well after curfew, so then we got our names taken down because that had to sign him out of the Korean police station, then sign him in through the MPs at the base. Went out the next day with the folks from the Judge Advocate's office, the JAG office, and we ended up working out a deal because we had all of this, and we had a lot of very talented folks in the squadron, other than just fixing helicopters. Guys that have been work, carpentry, construction, this type of other stuff. And we had all this flooring from the tents, which was all 2x4s and 3/4 inch plywood. And so we kind of came up, kind of jokingly, well, suppose we rebuild the roof on the house. Would that make amends for what we did? And they accepted it. So we ended up keeping about 10 people back, including the crew chiefs that were involved in this mess. As we had other people, we had enough extra folks where we could crew the aircraft back to Fatima. And in about 3 days, we rebuilt the folks' roof on the house, and had to put tile on top of the plywood and tar paper and all that stuff to make it weatherproof and everything. And then we got back by way of a Air Force C-130, flew us from there back to Kadena. And when we got back, our CO was ready to see us personally, one by one, as far as what is going on. And it all came out good in the end. We ended up with a story in Stars and Stripes for helping out the Korean people in their other hour of disaster there, and they really didn't dwell too much on the falling through the roof thing that the guys did, but it really gelled the squadron. And it's in the squadron cruise book from that, the picture of the 4 reindeer. And one of those reindeer is still on active duty today, He's a Lieutenant Colonel LDO at 2nd Mall. So if Lenny Domitrovitz ever sees this, he's going to remember that story very well, along with everybody else. But that was in '86, and we had a successful deployment, came home, swapped over, I believe we were swapped over with 262, and we picked up their aircraft back in Hawaii when we got back, and got settled back into life there. Another year and a half, we were back in Okinawa again for a second deployment. Not as eventful this time. The squadron was a little bit more seasoned. We had a change of command, a different CO, a different outlook on everything. Key officers were in different positions by this time. I had served a stint as the QA officer for a while because our QA officer ended up going to the operations section, and we had lost people, so I ended up being maintenance control, QA, and avionics for a little bit. And then we got some folks in and got some reassignments in, so that all worked out pretty well. Finally had another ground officer show up, and that was good because it was kind of getting lonely with just me, myself, and I trying to cover all this stuff, but had a lot of good staff and COs that supported the whole thing. Like I said, did another deployment, came back, and then stayed with the squadron until early June of '89, and that's when I transferred to Point Mugu. And I was on an R&D program there with the UAV outbreak, or the development they were doing with the Pioneer system. And that team that was there was a joint team between half Marine, half Navy. We were part of the Marine Aviation Detachment there at Point Mugu. There was only about maybe 40 Marines altogether, and we had about 8 of those 40 on our UAV development team. Went and supported the Navy on the battleships, the Army down at Fort Huachuca, and the Marine, at that time, RPV companies at either 29 Palms or Camp Lejeune. And then the next summer is when Saddam invaded Kuwait and Desert Storm started, and each of the services deployed all their RPV units over to the Middle East immediately, and that meant that our unit was also going, because we were delivering new software. The airframes were getting upgraded from basically balsa wood and fabric, like an old RC plane, to Kevlar frames. And spent about 6 months off and on over there, made 3 or 4 trips back and forth for different things. And came home for the final time. I think it was in April of '91, after Desert Storm was over, and that was a different thing. I ran into 364 was in Okinawa at that point. They were not in Saudi for Desert Shield or Storm, but there were other Frog squadrons were there, and those guys would bring supplies out to us at the RPV sites, because we were out in the middle of the sand. I mean, it was amazing how many Frog guys I ran into out there that they'd land and would know who because they would always have to shut down and do all that because there was just too much sand flying around and the engines were ingesting too much stuff. And so I got to see a lot of the Frog community over there on that. Got done with my time at Point Mugu, and got transferred down to Tustin in MAL 16, and I was down there in 16 for about 3.5 years or so, and then at that point they moved me over to MALS 11 with the F-18s, because for career development I needed some fixed wing time, and I was a major by then, and went over there for about 4 months, and then the wing avionics officer transferred to North Island, and so I ended up going up to the wing and spent the rest of my active duty time at 3rd Mall until the late part of '96, and the monitors came out for a visit, and they informed me that I was going to be going to CMC the following summer, Headquarters Marine Corps, and I did not want to go to DC. So at that point, when all the negotiations were over and all the options were explored, I submitted my retirement papers. and retired in August of '97. From there, by that time, my wife, at that point, we had purchased a house in Santa Maria, California, and because it was near Vandenberg Air Force Base, so we could utilize the hospital and the commissary and everything. And she had opened a dog grooming business. So I went up there after I retired with the agreement that I would give her until, for 2 months to support, fixing around the business and support what needed to be done there, and then I'd start looking for a job. And I did my 2-month commitment, and then I found a job working for a company named Strasbaugh, which builds grinders and planerizers and the equipment used in the semiconductor manufacturing process. They take the discs, they polish them, they do the etching there, these machines do that. And they sell them to any number of the fabs worldwide, primarily in the Far East, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and mainland Japan, China. So in '98 I spent a lot of time in Taiwan and China and the other ones, but primarily in Taiwan, because I was one of the engineers on the new tool that was being developed. So I was working in the fabs with the process engineers, showing them how to work it, better optimize the yield and everything from the equipment. Stayed with that company until about the middle of 2002. Had gone through a significant downsizing because the semiconductor industry took a big hit in the late, I think it was '99 when they took, the company I was working for went from 400 people worldwide one day to 175 the next. And people found out that they were being laid off because they would come into work and their email wouldn't come up. And that's how they found out that they were being laid off, which was really a very lousy way of doing that. My boss at that point had got laid off, and I ended up with his job. And stayed there with the company, like I say, until middle of '92, and then through another contact, got a call from ITT, which is one of the contractors out at Vandenberg Air Force Base that supports the space launch, and basically asked me if I wanted a job. So I went out there and took a look around, and yeah, it was interesting, and it was in much more of a structured environment than what I had at Strasbaugh, and I kind of liked that. And so I went to work out there as a test engineer, testing the command destruct systems, the radar tracking systems, the telemetry systems. And so anytime we would do a software upgrade or do a major refurbishment or whatever, we'd have to write a detailed test procedure, have the Air Force approve it, and then go through, detailed testing in order to get this thing done. And stayed working out there until May of this year when I retired.